There comes a night when even the strongest feel their bones trembling under the weight of invisible battles. Not the kind you fight with your fists or your finances, but the kind that rages in your blood, your breath, your very being. Maybe that's where you are now. The diagnosis was more than a medical term, it was a sentence, not just of illness, but of fear, of finality, of asking, God, where are you in this? They told you to stay strong, they told you to pray, but no one prepared you for the silence. No one told you what to do when your body screams and heaven is quiet. When the medicine numbs the pain, but not the panic. When the hospital bed feels more like a grave than a place of healing. And even though people are praying for you and the doctors are trying their best, you feel too alone, like your name has been forgotten in God's hands. But there's something about desperation that purifies faith, because when the body breaks, the soul listens, deeply, desperately. And in that fragile place, Scripture doesn't just sound beautiful, it becomes breath, life, rescue. There's one psalm, ancient, powerful, whispered across generations, that holds healing not just for the body, but for the heart writhing inside it. Psalm 103, the balm in the middle of breakdown, the promise in the middle of panic. Who forgives all your iniquities, who heals all your diseases, Psalm 103:3. It doesn't whisper, he heals. It doesn't suggest, he does. Even when we can't feel it. Even when the healing doesn't come in the way we expect, he is the healer, not just of symptoms, but of the sickness beneath the sickness. If this story has already touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments. What do you think God is trying to show us through this? Now let's continue. Before we ever felt fever in the flesh, humanity burned with a deeper sickness. Long before the first doctor held a stethoscope or the first pill was swallowed, our souls had already begun to decay under the weight of sin, fear, shame, and disconnection from our Creator. What we call illness today often starts with something unseen, bitterness buried deep, wounds never named, forgiveness never released, hope slowly suffocated by disappointment. Psalm 103 doesn't begin with healing, it begins with remembrance. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all his benefits. Before God heals the body, he often restores the soul's memory. Because when you're lying in a bed with tubes in your arms and the clock ticking louder than your faith, you forget who he is. You forget what he's done. You forget that the same God who split the sea and fed 5,000 is still moving, even in hospitals, even in hospice, even in you. He forgives all your iniquities, not some, not the ones you've managed to clean up. All. The healing begins there, not with clean scans or good news from the doctor, but with the holy unraveling of guilt, because disease loves to cling to shame. But grace breaks both. This psalm isn't a bandage for the flesh, it's surgery for the soul. David wasn't writing it in the comfort of perfect health. He was likely writing it in the memory of God's mercy, clinging to promises he'd seen in the darkness of caves, the threat of enemies and the trembling regret of sin. You cannot separate healing from holiness. And sometimes God delays the cure, so we can discover the deeper healing he's always wanted to do. If this story has already touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments. What do you think God is trying to show us through this? Now let's continue. There comes a point in the fight where quoting scripture starts to feel like pretending. You recite verses like Psalm 103 aloud, he heals all your diseases, but somewhere between your mouth and your bones, the truth feels lost. You want to believe it. You try to believe it. But the test results keep coming back worse. The pain doesn't ease. The healing doesn't arrive. And the promise starts to feel like a cruel echo rather than a sacred truth. This is the wilderness of the sick, the in-between where your theology is tested, not in a classroom but in a hospital hallway, where faith is no longer a sermon but a survival instinct. You don't just read the word anymore, you cling to it with trembling hands and tear-streaked eyes. You beg it to be real, and God mercifully, mysteriously, does not rush the process. You see, faith is not proven in the absence of pain. Faith is proven in the presence of it. Psalm 103 is not a fantasy, it's a weapon, not a wishful poem, but a sword forged in the fires of suffering. It reminds us that God's character is not defined by what we feel, but by what He's revealed. You are not less faithful because you're scared. You are not less loved because you're still sick. God is not on trial. His promises are not shaky. But He is calling you deeper, not just to believe for a miracle, but to become a witness. And witnesses are forged in fire, not fantasy. Healing doesn't always begin with relief. Sometimes it begins with revelation, that the God who heals is more committed to your wholeness than your comfort. If this story has already touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments, what do you think God is trying to show us through this? Now let's continue. Imagine the stench of disease, the decay of flesh, the isolation of shame. Lepers in biblical times weren't just sick, they were banished, untouchable, forgotten. They didn't just carry sores, they carried silence, separation, and the weight of being labeled unclean. And yet, Jesus touched them. He didn't have to. A word would have been enough. A command, a glance. But He reached out His hand and touched what everyone else avoided. That's the heart behind Psalm 103. Not just that God heals, but that He comes close. Closer than the IV drip. Closer than the surgeon's scalpel. Closer than fear. You may feel like the leper, marked by something you didn't choose, watched with pity or distance by those around you. Even church folk sometimes don't know what to say, so they stay silent. You hear their prayers but not their presence. You watch life go on outside your window while you battle for yours. But the same Jesus who touched the leper has not changed. Psalm 103 tells us, "The Lord is merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love." This is not the distant God of cold doctrine. This is the compassionate healer who gets His hands dirty, who enters rooms where others only whisper, who isn't afraid of your diagnosis. And when He comes close, something shifts, not always instantly in the body, but always in the soul. That touch may come through a nurse's kindness, a stranger's prayer, or the sudden warmth of peace in the middle of a long night. That's Him. That's still Him. Healing is not just the removal of illness, it's the arrival of God's presence in the places we thought He wouldn't dare come. If this story has already touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments, what do you think God is trying to show us through this? Now let's continue. Bless the Lord, O my soul. David writes this not from a palace of ease, but likely from a place of reflection, repentance, and raw humanity. It's a command to himself, a declaration issued not in celebration but in confrontation. Because, let's be honest, there are places where blessing God feels unnatural, where praising seems like betrayal to your pain, your fear, your waiting. How do you bless God when your bones ache, when the medicine isn't working, when sleep won't come? But that's the power of Psalm 103. It teaches us to bless the Lord not because of what we feel, but because of who He is. And that doesn't change, no matter what the chart says, no matter what the scan shows. Even when our world crumbles, He remains faithful, steady, holy. There's a sacred strength in worshiping when it hurts, in whispering praise when your throat is dry from crying, in lifting your heart when your body won't rise. You're not faking it, you're fighting for it. And that fight is an offering more precious than gold. It tells heaven, even here I will trust you. Even now I will bless you. God is not offended by your struggle. He's honored by your surrender. He meets you in the ashes and lifts your eyes to see something greater than the pain, His presence, His promises, His power. Who redeems your life from destruction, who crowns you with loving kindness and tender mercies. Psalm 103:4. Not just healed, but crowned. Not just spared, but loved. You may not be out of the valley yet, but even now, even here, your soul can sing. Not because the storm has stopped, but because your God never left. If this story has already touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments, what do you think God is trying to show us through this? Now, let's continue. You may feel like your body has betrayed you. Cells rebelling, strength dissolving, fatigue sinking deeper than sleep can fix. You may wonder if your faith is cracking under the weight of this illness, this season, this unknown. But Psalm 103 whispers something profoundly intimate. For he knows our frame, he remembers that we are dust. Psalm 103:14. Let that sink in. God does not expect you to be steel. He formed you from dust. He knows the limits of your flesh, the brittleness of your bones, the fragility of your emotions. He is not surprised by your exhaustion. He is not offended by your breakdown. In fact, he anticipated it and still chose to love you, heal you, carry you. Your tears do not disqualify you. Your fears do not erase your faith. Your weakness is not a failure. It is the very space where his strength is most clearly revealed. Paul said it best, "His power is made perfect in weakness." And Psalm 103 confirms it, not by demanding more from us, but by reminding us that God already knows how little we have left, and still he comes close. He heals not just to restore the body, but to prove that our worth was never tied to our productivity. He redeems our life from destruction because he loves us, not because we've performed well. In your sickbed, in your waiting room, in the sterile quiet of hospital nights, he sees you, not as broken but as beloved. You don't have to pretend you're okay. You don't have to smile through it all. He already knows, and he stays. Healing may come slow, but grace never does. And in this waiting, he is weaving mercy into every breath you still have. If this story has already touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments, what do you think God is trying to show us through this? Now let's continue. There's a kind of medicine the world can't prescribe. It's not found in pills or procedures, not traced in blood tests or measured by machines. Psalm 103 calls it out by name, who crowns you with loving kindness and tender mercies. You may be praying for healing in your body, but God is also trying to crown your soul. You've seen the harshness of sickness, the appointments that feel mechanical, the conversations that end in statistics. You've learned how lonely it gets when people don't know what to say anymore, when your name becomes a diagnosis, when the journey wears out your hope. But in the middle of that, the Father doesn't just bring power, he brings kindness. His mercy is not a concept, it's a touch, a breath, a gentle reminder that even now, even like this, you are still his. And his love isn't distant, it's not clinical. It's tender. That word isn't accidental, it's surgical. It gets into the places where trauma has nested, where fear has built a home, where grief has hardened you. And it does what chemo can't. It makes you feel seen. Maybe the real beginning of healing isn't when the pain stops, but when your heart softens. When you stop bracing for disappointment and start daring to believe again. That's the miracle God begins with. He doesn't just fix what's failing, he reclaims what's been numbed. In a world that rushes and reduces, God still crowns. He doesn't just restore your health, he restores your dignity. He doesn't just remove the illness, he reaffirms your identity, loved, held, crowned, even here. So yes, pray for healing, cry out for relief, but also watch for the kindness. It may arrive before the cure, and often it is the cure. If this story has already touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments, what do you think God is trying to show us through this? Now, let's continue. There's a hunger that sickness creates, a hunger not just for health but for meaning, for peace, for something real that holds while everything else shakes. And in Psalm 103:5, we find something that almost sounds too good for the pain you're in. Who satisfies your mouth with good things so that your youth is renewed like the eagles? How can that be? How does a soul surrounded by IV bags and bad news find satisfaction? What good things can fill a mouth weary from praying the same desperate prayer over and over again? You're not asking for riches, not even for comfort. You just want the strength to make it through one more night. But that's the miracle of God's presence. Satisfaction does not always mean escape. It often means encounter. It's when God steps into the fire with you, when he feeds you peace instead of panic, when he fills your soul with something the sickness can't steal. He knows what your spirit needs even when your body is failing. And sometimes before the healing arrives, he gives you renewal, quiet strength that doesn't come from good news, but from goodness itself. Like manna in the desert, God satisfies his people in the most unlikely places, not by removing the wilderness, but by feeding them in the middle of it. That's what he's doing for you. Maybe your youth isn't in your body anymore. Maybe the eagle's strength doesn't look like a cure, but like courage, like rising when you've fallen 100 times, like hope that outlives despair. That's what the satisfied soul knows. This pain is not the end. There's still something good God is planting inside of you. Even now, your spirit is being renewed. If this story has already touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments, what do you think God is trying to show us through this? Now let's continue. Sickness tries to speak with authority. It uses numbers, scans, symptoms, and timelines to declare what your life is, or what it will never be again. It uses fear as punctuation and finality as its tone. But Psalm 103 ends with a thunderous reminder: the final word does not belong to the disease, it belongs to the Lord. The Lord has established his throne in the heavens, and his kingdom rules over all. Psalm 103:19. All. Not just the spiritual realm, not just Sunday mornings, all. That includes hospital rooms, ICU monitors, and sleepless nights. His throne is above it. His kingdom rules over it. And what he decrees cannot be undone by diagnosis, despair, or death. This isn't wishful thinking, it's sovereign reality. The same voice that spoke galaxies into motion is the voice that declares healing, mercy, and restoration over you. The same hands that shaped your frame from dust are the hands that still hold your future, even now. And as the psalm concludes in a crescendo of praise, angels blessing his name, hosts doing his will, all works in all places praising him, it's as if David is saying, join the song. Not because your body is whole yet, not because everything's fixed, but because the one who made you is still in control. You are not forgotten. You are not alone in this. And the healing you need, whether it comes today or in eternity, flows from a God who has already won. Disease doesn't write your story. God does. So bless the Lord, O your soul, even now, especially now. Because while the world sees your weakness, heaven sees a warrior. And while sickness may have tried to name you, God has already claimed you as his. If this story has already touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments, what do you think God is trying to show us through this? Now let's continue. Hay momentos en los que oramos con todo el corazón, y aún así, la sanidad no llega como esperábamos. El cuerpo se debilita, la medicina no funciona, las lágrimas aumentan. Y entonces surge la pregunta que pocos se atreven a hacer. ¿Y si Dios no me sana aquí? Pero escucha esto, Dios siempre sana. A veces lo hace en la tierra, otras veces en la eternidad. Pero nunca deja una oración sin respuesta, ni un alma fiel sin recompensa. El Salmo 103 no promete inmortalidad en esta vida, pero sí restauración completa en su presencia. En Él no hay pérdida final, solo transformación gloriosa. Él rescata tu vida del sepulcro. Incluso si tu cuerpo descansa en la tumba, tu alma se levanta con Él. Quizás no veas el milagro aquí, pero verás al Dios del milagro cara a cara. Y entonces, todo dolor se desvanecerá. Todo sufrimiento será historia. Porque allá, donde no hay enfermedad ni muerte, estarás completo. Confía. Descansa. Si no es aquí, será allá. Si este mensaje tocó tu corazón, suscríbete al canal y cuéntanos en los comentarios. ¿Qué crees que Dios quiere enseñarnos a través de esto?